So this is the finished Deathmark that we're going to be painting up for this video. Really pleased with how he turned out, but they are very cool looking Necrons. They have the different coloured shoulder pads and armour on the back and all those little glowing orbs. They are great fun to paint. Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to paint Necron Deathmarks. If you'd like to support the channel, our Ko-fi and Patreon page is a link below. Now on to the video. The first colour we're going to use is Citadel Black Templar Contrast, which I haven't shown here. So an excellent way to start the video. I'm just going to be painting all the bits that look black with Black Templar. I find that using this is a lot easier than just using a standard black paint to go on. It gets into all those recesses and it's really nice flow to it. So you can do a layer or two of this on all the areas that you want black, and it'll look fine, and it'll probably take you about half the time as using normal black paint. You can hear any noise in the background. I've got Linnet 2 sat on my lap and she's purring away. Keeps standing up right next to the microphone, so you may hear her purring or faffing about as the video goes on. Next up is Citadel Iron Hand Steel. We're using this mainly on the Canoptek Disintegrator, which is a cracking name for a weapon. But give all the parts that aren't black a nice coat of Iron Hand Steel, and you can't go wrong. Now we're going to be using a little bit of Vallejo White, and this is going to be to paint the face mask of the Necron. Also you have all those little glowing details, like the little lines that are getting painted on there. You also have all of the little lines down the barrel. You've got orbs on the front of the face, on the shoulders, on the back of the shoulders, the lower back, and a larger one hanging from the base of that black section of armour. So you paint all these with white, and then we can use the Tesseract glow a little bit later on to give them that nice glowing green effect. I'm just going to go over all of the armoured parts of the Necron's body with Citadel Runelord Brass. You can see a few little bits here where there may be a ridge or a mould line or an area where I've scraped it off. So it's also a good idea to paint this on after you've scraped away all of those, or as many as you want to scrape off anyway. I tend to spot them when I'm painting and then have to go back over it, but whatever is your preference. Doesn't seem to be any Canoptek alloy on the Deathmarks because the shoulder pads that are usually that colour and the face are painted with black and white respectively. So we're going to shade the white areas with Citadel Apothecary White Contrast. Now this is good that it leaves it still fairly white, but it gets that slightly darker grey section in the recesses. So you paint this onto the orbs and the face mask too. Next up is Citadel BL Tan Green. We're using this on the glowing sections. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding a little bit to the end of the longer lines of white, and also down the middle of this section I wanted to make it look like the glow is pulsing a little bit, so I'm using a bit of BL Tan Green in the recess there to darken up three sections of that. And when you put the Tesseract glow on, that should give it that darker sections where it looks like it's pulsing with light going along. You also want to use this on the orbs as well, so make sure that you get that kind of around the edges and the areas where the glow isn't going to be as prominent. I'm going to go over these bits now with Citadel Tesseract glow and put that glow in there. We'll be able to see whether or not my plan has worked. It has worked to an extent. So next time I paint them I'll probably add a little bit more BL Tan Green. I wasn't too sure how much to use there, but if you want a video on how to do that light so it looks like it's pulsing along that barrel, then we can do that, no problem. Next, Citadel Nuln Oil. And this is just for the parts that we've painted with the Iron Hand Steel. So be careful because we've done the glow already. and you've got those lighter coloured recesses. Just be really careful when you apply this one, and you can put that over the silvers. If you did want to do it in a slightly easier way, you could do the silver, shade it, and then add the white to it and just touch that up afterwards. That should work too. But if you're doing the Nuln Oil afterwards, then just be careful when you're putting it on to try not to get any in the recesses. And if you do, try and absorb it with a dry brush or another brush as you go. Now we're going to be using Citadel Canoptek Armourshade Gloss, and this is just to do all of those Runelord Brass sections. It gives them that kind of dirty, worn and weathered look. Now we can build up the layers from that and make them look a lot shinier and a lot nicer. Now we're going to start reapplying the colours. So we're going to start with Citadel Runelord Brass, and this is going to be to start reapplying the colours to the armour plate on the Necron himself, or herself. So we want to be adding this to the areas where the light's going to be catching it more, depending on how you want to paint them up. Like these guys don't have any of the battle damage and stuff like that that the newer Necron miniatures do. So if you just paint them up as is, you can paint it so they're nice and shiny. So think about where the light is catching those sections of metal and where you want those lighter reflective shades to be. Next up is Citadel Canoptek Alloy, which is a lighter version of Runelord Brass, I like to say. And we're going to paint about 50% of the area of the Runelord Brass that we've just applied with Canoptek Alloy. This will give that nice shine. It's a really, really shiny colour, this one. And that'll just brighten that up no end. Final highlight, we're going to use a little bit of Vallejo Modeler Chrome and mix that with some of the Canoptek Alloy. We're going to use this to do edge highlights to the sections of his armour, like the Runelord Brass parts, and this will give it a really, really nice shine and defined edge. You don't want to do all of the edges, you just want to do the parts where the light will be catching it. If you do all of them, it can look a little bit over the top, I think. By doing the main ones that be catching the light, you can't go wrong with that. Now I'm going to use some Vallejo German Grey, and we're just going to highlight all of the areas that we did with the Black Templar, and think about where the light is catching these parts and add it to them. So it's mainly going to be like top sides or edges that are going to be exposed to above. Good thing about the German Grey is that it's a very dark grey, and it allows you to highlight the black without it being too obvious and too bright. Now we're going to return to Citadel Iron Hand Steel, and we're just going to use a touch of this so that we can touch up those areas of the synaptic disintegrator that we used with the Iron Hand Steel earlier on, making sure you leave the Nuln Oil in the recesses and on those wider flat surfaces. Now we're just going to use a little bit of Vallejo Modeler Chrome on its own. I'm going to use this to do the kind of piston sections that you have on the legs as well. We've got those two little rods for the lower leg. The outer one looks a little bit like a piston, so we've painted it silver, so do the same on the arms. And you have 2 or 3 usually around the head too. You can also use this if you wanted to give it a bit more shine, to do some little edge highlights on those Iron Hand Steel sections, but I don't tend to bother with that. Now it's time for a little bit of Mechanicus Standard Grey. We are going to use this to edge highlight all of those areas that we highlighted with the German Grey earlier on. So this is just for edge highlights. There's some nice angular parts, and you've got little joints between the plates on his shoulders. So you can do some nice edge highlights with this to make those sections stand out. So again, think about where the light's coming from, how you want to put those highlights on, and try to only put them on in areas where it will be catching more light. Now we're going to use some Vallejo White. This is going to be to paint his face mask. What we're also going to do is to give those globes and glowing sections a nicer, brighter look. We're going to use it to do some areas of white on each of the globes and on that glowing tube at the front of the Canoptek disintegrator, so that when we go over that with Tesseract glow next, you'll have that nice bright section of those orbs and that tube. So it's mainly going to be around the sort of like the center of the top side of those orbs. So you can see that here where I've painted them. I'm just going to use a little bit of Tesseract glow, give them a thin coat so that they stand out quite nicely. Now if you do get quite an obvious join between the area that you've just highlighted and the area that was highlighted earlier on in the video, you can just use a little bit of extra Tesseract glow around the edges of that and that'll blend them in together. Like that. And that is the final colour. Is the finished Deathmark. Really pleased with how it turned out. I really like the colours that they used for them as well. It's given it that different look, so they will stand out against the rest of your forces. And that back section with all the glowing globes looks really cool. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media, linked below. Thanks very much. If you like the channel and you enjoy the content and you'd like to support me, my Ko-fi and Patreon pages are linked below. Thanks very much.